I remember the way the kitchen smelled that morning. Coffee, toast, the faintest hint of lemon cleaner. The house was quiet, the way it always was before the world woke up. I stood at the sink, staring out the window at the backyard, the same view I'd seen for 23 years. The maple tree we planted when Danny was born had grown taller than the roof. The grass was trimmed, the flower beds neat, everything in its place. From the outside, my life must have looked like a postcard. Good job. Nice house in a solid neighborhood. 2 kids, both grown now, doing all right for themselves. A wife who still turned heads when we went out to dinner. On paper, I had no right to feel anything but grateful. But there's a difference between a life that looks whole and one that feels whole. I poured my coffee, black, no sugar, and sat at the table. The newspaper was folded just how I liked it. Linda always left it that way for me, a small kindness I'd stopped noticing years ago. She moved around the kitchen in her robe, humming something under her breath. We didn't talk much in the mornings anymore, not like we used to. Back then we'd sit shoulder to shoulder at this same table, sharing sections of the paper, her feet tucked under my legs. Now, we moved around each other like polite strangers, careful not to take up too much space. I watched her as she buttered her toast. Still beautiful. Still the same sharp green eyes that had caught me the first time we met at that company picnic in '89. But something was different now. The way she held herself, the way her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at me. I told myself it was just time, just the natural drift of a long marriage. Then she said it, not with tears, not with anger. Just quiet, matter of fact, like she was telling me the weather. I think we should talk about separating. The words didn't land right away. I remember staring at my coffee, watching the steam curl up and disappear. I should have seen it coming. The late nights at the office, hers, not mine. The new perfume, the way she'd started dressing sharper, laughing louder at other people's jokes. But I hadn't. Or maybe I just didn't want to. Is there someone else? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just looked at me with something like pity, and that was worse. I took my coffee out to the porch. The sun was coming up, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. The neighbors would be waking soon, starting their own routines in their own perfect-looking houses. I sat there, gripping the mug too tight, feeling the heat seep into my palms. And for the first time in years, I let myself wonder, when did we stop being us? The answer, when it came, was worse than silence. I didn't know. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. I wandered through it like a ghost, touching things. The framed family photos on the wall, the coffee mug with "World's Best Dad" faded from years of dishwashing. Linda had taken half her clothes, but the emptiness wasn't just in the closet. It was in the silence. The way the floors didn't creak under her footsteps in the morning. The way the phone didn't ring with her laugh on the other end. I told myself I'd be fine. I'd been the steady one, the reliable one. I could handle this. Then I found the earring. It was tucked behind the nightstand on her side of the bed, a small silver hoop, delicate, the kind she never used to wear. Linda had always preferred understated studs, classic pearls. But lately she'd started wearing things like this, flashier, younger. I held it in my palm, feeling the weight of it, the cool metal against my skin. It wasn't just an earring, it was proof. Proof that she'd changed, that I hadn't noticed, that someone else had. I sat on the edge of the bed, the earring clenched in my fist. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, the expensive one she'd bought last year. Just for special occasions, she'd said. How many of those occasions had there been without me? I thought about calling Danny, or my sister. But what would I say? I think your mother left me for someone else, and I'm sitting here holding her earring like it's some kind of clue. It sounded pathetic even in my head, so I did what I'd always done. I swallowed it down. I went to work, smiled at the right times, nodded through meetings. But my hands shook when I poured my coffee, and once, in the middle of a conversation, I realized I hadn't heard a word anyone had said for the last 5 minutes. At night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The bed was too big. The dark was too loud. I replayed every moment of the last few years, searching for the exact second things had started to unravel. Had it been when the kids moved out? When I stopped suggesting date nights? When she started coming home later, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with stories I wasn't part of? I didn't know. And that was the worst part. Not the leaving, not the earring, not even the quiet humiliation of being replaced. It was the realization that I couldn't pinpoint when I'd stopped being someone she wanted to stay for. The earring stayed in my pocket for days, a stupid silent weight, a reminder. Then, one evening, I pulled it out and held it up to the light. It glinted, sharp and pretty. And I wondered, if I'd paid attention sooner, would it have made a difference? Or had I already lost her long before she walked away? The first month was the worst. I woke up every morning expecting to hear Linda moving around in the kitchen, only to remember all over again that she wasn't there. The silence pressed against my ribs like a physical weight. I stopped shaving, let the dishes pile up. The house smelled like takeout containers and stale coffee. Then, one Tuesday, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize myself. My hair was greasy, my eyes bloodshot. The collar of my wrinkled work shirt gaped loose around my neck. I'd lost weight without noticing. For the first time in decades, I thought about my father, how he'd looked in the months after my mother died. Hollow, like someone had scooped out the best parts of him and left the shell behind. I turned on the shower, stood under the water until it ran cold. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store. I didn't have a plan, just a need to move, to do something. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I wandered the aisles, running my fingers over bags of mulch and cans of paint. My hands remembered the weight of tools before my mind did. I bought sandpaper, a new chisel, a slab of cherry wood that felt warm and alive under my palms. That night, I cleared the dust off my old workbench in the garage. The smell of sawdust brought back a memory so sharp it hurt. Building Danny's crib 30 years ago, Linda leaning in the doorway with a smile, her hands resting on her pregnant belly. I pushed the memory away, sanded the wood until my shoulders ached and my fingers blistered. The project didn't matter. The motion did. The way the grain emerged under my hands, smooth and raw and new. Over the next weeks, the garage became my refuge. I built a bookshelf, then a coffee table. Then, on a whim, a jewelry box with dovetail joints so tight they clicked when I opened it. I sanded each piece until it felt like silk, staining them with oils that deepened the wood's natural glow. One evening, my neighbor Frank stopped by to borrow a wrench. He whistled at the half-finished side table on my bench. "Damn, John, you could sell these." I laughed it off, but later, lying awake, I pictured it, my hands making something useful, something beautiful, something that wouldn't leave. The next morning, I took photos of my work and posted them online. By noon, 3 people had asked for commissions. It wasn't about the money. It was about the way my chest loosened just a little when I worked. The way I could lose hours measuring, cutting, sanding, time passing without the constant gnaw of her. But sometimes when I sanded a curve just right or caught the light on a finished piece, I'd turn to say, "Look at this," and the empty garage would swallow my words. The question hung in the sawdust-filled air. Was I building a new life, or just hiding from the old one? The local paper ran a story about my work. I hadn't expected it. Just a small feature in the Sunday Arts section, complete with photos of my walnut dining table and that cherrywood jewelry box. The reporter called it a second act forged from heartbreak. I cringed when I read it, but my hand shook holding the paper all the same. Orders started pouring in, not just from neighbors anymore, but from designers in the city, from couples registering for weddings. My garage workshop became crowded with half-finished commissions, the air thick with the scent of linseed oil and ambition. I should have been proud. But success, it turned out, was a strange kind of loneliness. One afternoon, as I was packing up a custom desk for shipping, my phone buzzed. A text from Danny. "Saw the article, Dad. Looks amazing. Mom would have..." The message cut off there, then deleted. A new one appeared seconds later. "Proud of you." I stared at those 3 words until the screen went dark. That night, I drove past our old favorite restaurant, the one Linda and I used to go to for anniversaries. The lights were on, couples visible through the frosted glass windows. I didn't stop. Just sat in my idling car at the red light, watching a man about my age hold the door open for his wife, the way his hand lingered at the small of her back. I wondered if Richard took her there now. My workshop became both sanctuary and prison. The more my business grew, the more I realized no amount of sanding could smooth away the past. The rhythm of my hands, measure, cut, sand, finish, became a kind of meditation, but the quiet moments between were dangerous. That's when the memories crept in. The way Linda used to bring me iced tea on hot summer days, condensation dripping down the glass. How she'd roll her eyes but smile when I got sawdust on the kitchen floor. The particular arch of her eyebrow when I'd show her a finished piece. Her critical eye always making my work better. One client, a sharp-eyed interior designer named Mara, studied my latest commission, a mahogany display cabinet, and said, "There's something sad in your pieces. Beautiful, but wistful." I laughed it off, told her it was just the nature of wood, trees remembering the forest. But later, sanding the cabinet's edges, I caught myself holding my breath as I passed my palm over the grain, like if I touched it gently enough, carefully enough, I might find some answer in the whorls and knots. The wood never lied. It showed every flaw, every repair, every moment of inattention. I wondered what it would see if it could read my own grain. The question followed me home that night, through the empty house, into a bed that still felt too large. Was I building furniture or just monuments to everything I'd failed to notice? The hardware store smelled the same as always, pine tar and metal, floor wax and hope. I was comparing two brands of wood glue when I felt the air change, that subtle shift you sense before you consciously know why. Then I heard her laugh. Linda stood 3 aisles over, her back to me, examining paint samples. She held a color swatch in one hand, a soft blue, like the bedroom walls in our first apartment. Richard stood beside her, his arm draped possessively around her waist, his mouth moving near her ear. She laughed again, that bright, effortless sound that used to make my chest ache with love. Now it made my hands go numb around the glue bottle. I should have turned away. Walked out. But some masochistic part of me stayed frozen, watching through the shelving as she tilted her head toward him, as his fingers traced idle circles on her hip. They looked easy together, comfortable, like they'd shared 1,000 mornings and private jokes. The glue bottle cracked in my grip. I don't know what sound it made, just that Linda turned suddenly, her eyes scanning the aisle until they landed on me. Her smile died mid-laugh. For one suspended second, we stared at each other across 25 years and 1,000 regrets. Then Richard followed her gaze. I saw the exact moment recognition dawned in his expression. First confusion, then that faint smugness successful men wear like cologne. His grip tightened on Linda's waist. She didn't pull away. "John," she said, "just my name." But I heard everything in it, surprise, guilt, pity. The glue had started leaking onto my fingers, sticky and warm. I set the ruined bottle on the shelf with deliberate calm. "Linda." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Richard." We stood there in that terrible triangle, the store's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I noticed new lines around Linda's eyes, the way her hair was shorter now, styled differently. She wore a silver bracelet I'd never seen before. Richard cleared his throat. "Heard about your woodworking business. Congrats." The words were right, but his tone made my knuckles itch. Linda's eyes darted between us, her fingers worrying that blue paint sample. "Yeah," I said. "Thanks." The silence stretched. A child squealed somewhere near the registers. Finally, Linda touched Richard's arm. "We should—" "Right," I interrupted. "You have things to do." I walked away before she could reply. My hand shook as I pushed through the exit doors into the parking lot. The sunlight felt brutally bright after the store's artificial glow. Halfway to my truck, I realized I'd forgotten the sandpaper I came for. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at my glue-streaked hands. That's when I noticed. The way Linda had looked at me hadn't been regret or longing. It had been relief. The question followed me home, louder than the radio, louder than my own breathing. Had she been happier to see me, or to realize she felt nothing at all? The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. I knew before I picked up. Somewhere deep in my bones, in the way the night air seemed to hold its breath, I knew it would be her. The glow of the caller ID confirmed it. Linda Holmes still saved in my contacts after all this time, like some stubborn ghost I couldn't exorcise. I let it ring 3 times. 4. On the 5th, I answered. Neither of us spoke at first. Just the sound of her breathing, uneven and wet, like she'd been crying. The silence stretched so long I could hear ice cubes clinking in a glass on her end. "You're up," she finally said. Not, "I'm sorry," or "I shouldn't be calling." Just those 2 words loaded with 25 years of knowing each other's habits. I sat up against the headboard, the sheets pooling around my waist. Moonlight striped the empty side of the bed. "So are you." Another pause. A car passed outside my window, headlights sweeping across the ceiling. "I saw your pieces in that design magazine last week," she said. Her voice had that careful, measured tone she used when trying not to slur. "The walnut credenza. It's stunning." I closed my eyes. She'd always been the first to spot flaws in my work. A joint not quite flush, a finish slightly uneven. Stunning wasn't a word she used lightly. "Thanks," I said. The ice clinked again. When she spoke next, her voice cracked. Richard left. I should have felt something then. Vindication, satisfaction, even pity. But all I felt was tired and old. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. She gave a wet laugh. "No, you're not." She was right. For a moment, I let myself imagine driving over there, sitting at her kitchen table like I used to, watching her twist her wedding ring around her finger when she was nervous. But then I remembered the way she'd looked at me in the hardware store, like I was a stranger, like our history meant nothing. "Why'd you call, Linda?" The silence this time was different, heavy. I could practically hear her weighing her words, deciding how much truth to spill at this hour. "I keep thinking about that maple bookshelf you made for Danny's nursery," she whispered. "How you stayed up all night finishing it because I wanted it perfect. How your hands shook when you handed me the extra shelf for the next one." My throat tightened. We'd never needed that extra shelf. Outside, an owl called. Somewhere in the house, a pipe creaked. "That was a long time ago," I said. She exhaled sharply, like I'd punched her. "Yeah." We both knew what she was really saying, what she was asking without asking. The forgiveness, the second chance, the life we might have had if we'd paid better attention. When she spoke again, her voice was small. "Do you think if we—" "Don't," I interrupted. The line went quiet. The ice had stopped clinking. I stared at the moonlight on the wall, at the shadows of tree branches swaying like they were trying to write something just out of reach. "I should go," she said finally. "Yeah." Neither of us hung up. The question hung between us, in the dark, in the silence. How much of love is timing, and how much of it is choice? I waited 3 days before going to see her. The morning of, I sanded the edge of a mahogany jewelry box for hours. Not because it needed it, but because I needed the rhythm of it, the way the motion steadied my hands. The wood grew warm under my fingers, the grain emerging like a secret being whispered. Her house looked different. The porch swing we'd bought at a flea market 20 years ago was gone. The flower beds she used to fuss over were just mulch now, neat but colorless. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching the curtain in the front window twitch. She knew I was here. When she opened the door, she looked older than I remembered. Not in a bad way, just lived in. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, wearing the same faded Cornell sweatshirt she'd stolen from me in '98. "You came," she said. I held up the jewelry box. "Brought you something." Her hands trembled when she took it, the same hands that had held mine through labors and funerals and mortgage signings. She ran her thumb over the dovetail joints, the satin finish. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Then quieter. "You always were." The house smelled like vanilla and lemon cleaner, the same scent from our old life. But everything else had changed. The furniture was rearranged, the walls painted cooler colors. Only the kitchen clock remained, the one we'd bought on our honeymoon in Vermont, still ticking away the seconds. We sat at her new dining table, not one of mine, with coffee between us. She didn't have to tell me how she took it anymore. I thought about calling you again, she admitted, staring into her mug, after we hung up, but I didn't know what to say. I studied her face, the new lines around her mouth, the way her earlobes had elongated slightly over the years from the weight of earrings. Time had marked us both. Tell me the truth, I said. Just once. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. I loved you, but I loved the idea of being loved more. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed, somewhere outside a dog barked. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be enough. All the mornings I'd woken early to shovel snow off the driveway before she left for work. All the promotions I'd celebrated alone because she had book club. The way I'd memorized the exact shade of her lipstick so I could surprise her with it on anniversaries. Had she ever really seen me? Or just the outline of a man she could fill with her needs? She reached across the table. Her fingers stopped just short of mine. Can you ever— No, I said gently. Not cruel. Just final. We both exhaled at the same time. I stood, leaving the jewelry box between us. At the door, she touched my sleeve. Just once. Light as a leaf landing. I'm sorry, she said. I believed her. The sun was setting when I pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I watched her silhouette in the doorway grow smaller, then disappear. The question followed me home, quieter than the engine, softer than the radio. When does love become habit? And when does letting go become love?